Hello, welcome to this very special edition of Biz Talk on CGTN. I'm your host, Zheng Junfeng. You can see now we're in a very beautiful, nicely decorated studio right in the center of National Convention Center, which is one of the two venues for this year's CIFTIS, one of China's biggest expo in trading services, and also probably the biggest trading services expo in the world. And this year, the guest of honor country is Great Britain. That's why in the studio, we have a very special guest from China-Britain Business Council, or CBBC, China President Tom Simpson. Thank you for joining us, Tom.
A pleasure to be here.
Yeah, great. This morning, I visited the Great Britain Pavilion in the National Convention Center in CIFTIS. There's such a big crowd. I can see lots of British company executives, lots of British high-ranking officials. Tell us about the grand opening of the British Pavilion this morning.
Excellent. Well, we have a delegation of 60 British companies who are represented today at CIFTIS, and we had the opening joined by Minister Lord Johnson, the Minister for Investment, who's come over from the UK especially for CIFTIS. And we had an excellent program of events and activity to sort of kickstart the UK presence at CIFTIS, which will go right into tomorrow and through into, I think, Wednesday or Thursday this week.
Great. So I know that CBBC has been present for quite a number of years. How many years?
So next year will be our 70th year. So
70th?
70th year, yeah.
Okay,
so from 1954, which is when the first trade delegation from the UK came to China, came to the PRC to engage on trade and investment between our two countries.
Thanks for the introduction. So how, as the China president of CBBC, view CIFTIS as a platform for China-UK cooperation?
CIFTIS for CBBC has always been a very important platform for us because the UK, let's remember the UK is 80% services, trade and services
80%.
Economy. So our productivity as an economy comes from services. And the UK is also the second largest exporter of services in the world. So for us, our exports and services to a market like China are critical, are very important. And yet at the moment, our exports and services to China only constitute 27% of our total exports to China. So we see that number
only, so there's a potential.
Only. We see that should be much higher. So for other markets around the world, services are usually higher than goods for the UK, but for China, goods are higher than services. So we want to bring that number up. So we see the service industry as a key front to expand and grow the connections between our two countries, and CIFTIS being the ideal platform for us to promote new ways of working together.
Okay, so let us know what kind of companies, British companies, prominent companies are present here at CIFTIS. What kind of industries are they involved in?
Absolutely. So I'm pleased to say a very wide range of industries. So first of all, probably most prominently, you have the financial services industries. So you have banking, insurance, asset management, green finance, all these areas very much represented in our delegation and in our program over the course of CIFTIS. But also areas like creative industries, where the UK is a leading producer of television, of film, of games, of publishing, of all these different areas. And we have, again, a delegation from this sector represented here in Beijing over the course of CIFTIS, and also sports, where we have representatives from snooker, from football. In fact, we had the Premier League trophy and the FA Cup on our stands
I saw
this
this morning. So many people taking photos.
Our representatives from Manchester City Football Group are very proud to show off their trophies, which will be doing a tour of China as well whilst they're here. So the UK really has a lot to talk about when it comes to our service industry. And we're very pleased to be here and this, involved in CIFTIS in such a way that we are this year.
Then on the other side, what is so special about CIFTIS that it's attracting the British companies to attend?
Well, CIFTIS, the way I see it, you have CIE in Shanghai, which is the goods import fair. So a lot of our companies get involved in that fair when it comes to exporting goods to China.
CIE is so successful now.
And very successful. Yeah. And whereas, so for trade and service, export and services, CIFTIS is the platform. And we work a lot with the Beijing government in general, but also especially around CIFTIS and also with MOFCOM. And so together we see it as an ideal opportunity to promote excellence in UK services. And off the back of our presence here, there will be, in fact today there were a number of signing ceremonies. So deals that were signed in the education sector, in the TV sector. So a wide range of different areas, and also actually in healthcare as well.
Okay, I guess the previous 3 years had interrupted the services sector coordination between China and UK because services involve people-to-people communication, direct cooperation. So have you seen a trend of recovery in the services cooperation so far this year?
Yeah, it's a very good point, and I think the service industry certainly was impacted more heavily than goods, and in fact, on a goods side, we saw an increase in the UK exports to China, so that's been quite healthy. On the services side, more impacted, but as soon as UK companies had the ability to travel back into China, we've seen a sort of a wave of visits, mostly from UK senior representatives from UK multinationals that are already here or who are already investing here, who've already got established operations here. But I think what CIFTIS marks is the kind of beginning of that next phase, I think, where it's more about companies who perhaps in the last 3 years weren't able to do business here, who are now saying, we need to get back out to China. We need to be engaging with our partners, engaging with on potential new projects. And so that's why we've seen this group of 60 UK companies taking part in this delegation this week.
Okay, then let's talk about the bigger picture, the UK economy, because here in China and probably other parts of the world are confused sometimes of the status quo of the UK economy. Sometimes we get good numbers, sometimes we don't. There were also reports of the cost of living crisis, but some PMI numbers or the sentiment in the market remains strong. So tell us about the status now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, it's no, the UK has been through a lot of challenges in recent years with the COVID and the impact from COVID on the economy, and then the issues around energy prices, cost of living, and so forth. But I think what we're seeing in the UK economy are bright spots. So parts of the economy that continue to do very well. And many of those bits of the economy are represented here as part of CIFTIS. And I mentioned on the sort of the media side and the creative industry side, which is really one of the UK's sort of jewels in terms of UK exports, in terms of the excellence, in terms of production standards and qualities. Many of the world's most sort of famous and most identifiable films that appear as a Hollywood film are actually made in the UK and then exported globally.
Yeah. All the actors were trying to imitate British accent.
Right, yes, exactly, or British actors with American accents. So there are a lot of bright spots for the UK economy, despite everything that has been going on in recent years. And I hope, working with a country like China presents new opportunities and new ways for UK companies to be growing their exports and growing their activity with the rest of the world. And I think the UK's future is very much in trading globally and trading with countries like China.
Okay, so it's undergoing some recovery.
Exactly.
Notable recovery. Right. You've been in China for quite a while. Tell us your understanding of China's recovery so far this year, because there were so many reports on moderate recovery in consumption, some real estate problems. What about your personal perspective?
Well, I feel it's important to put it into context. At the end of the day, if China grows at 5%, that's still a very high number.
That's the target of the government, yeah.
Exactly, and I think that target, so far appears like a realistic, achievable target. And if China grows at 5%, that'll be around about 1/3 of global growth from one market. So that's the context that I think everyone needs to keep in mind. Of course, there are challenges, and there's certain industries at the moment, real estate being one of those, where there are very serious problems, and that presents challenges, obviously, for China's own private sector, state sector, but also for British companies who have been working with that sector for many years. But in other areas that are perhaps less directly affected by that, we continue to see UK multinationals who are doing quite healthy levels of growth in country. Perhaps not the levels of growth that they were perhaps expecting in January this year when things started reopening and there was lots of optimism and excitement about the way the sort of recovery might perform. But certainly a lot of our members, in fact the majority of our members that we speak to, are still seeing their revenues growing.
That's good. And what opportunities do you see when you talk to British companies and they ask about the China opportunities? What would you tell them?
Well, I would say, the UK, again, in the service industry, we excel in in a very wide range of areas. And I think China's market is becoming increasingly sophisticated. and so therefore increasingly compatible for an economy like the UK in terms of bringing in niche services, bringing in the sorts of expertise that UK companies can bring to the table, whether that's in areas like infrastructure and construction, whether that's in areas like the green transition, or it's in areas like professional services, so legal services, accounting services, etc. So there's a lot of complementarity between the Chinese economy and its sort of increasing sophistication and the services that the UK provides.
Yeah, you mentioned accounting, and I remembered I studied accounting in the University of Leeds, and you earlier told me that you also graduated from Leeds. What a coincidence. But I remember that even 10, 20 years ago, there were tens of thousands of Chinese international students flocking to the UK for overseas experiences, and now it's even still so much so, and growing steadily year by year. What is the UK schools done right to continuing and lift its international ranking and keep its attractions to Chinese students?
Well, I think there's a lot of reasons for it. I mean, I think the UK has 4 of the world's top 10 universities. So we have, quite simply, excellent universities. Also, our teaching is all in English, which is a language that many people in China speak very well. But also, I would say the environment for learning is very good. So UK is a great place to go and study because we've got a very pleasant place to live and so forth. And I think also the fact that so many Chinese students have gone there and had a positive experience and come back and told people of their experience, that more people are sort of encouraged to go. And actually also these days, if you go to the UK, even if you're in cities like Edinburgh, my hometown, you can find, Chongqing.
From Edinburgh.
Yeah, from Edinburgh, yeah. But you can find a Chongqing hot pot restaurant or a, Beijing, dumpling restaurant, whatever. So, it's much more comfortable for someone from China to go to the UK and live in the UK than perhaps it used to be.
Yeah, I mean, 20 years ago, there was no Chinese restaurant there, but I heard there's so many Chinese restaurants. The Chinatown got bigger, it's, offering lots of services to Chinese students there. It's good to know that. And my next question would be on the financial sector. Earlier, I talked to a British embassy councillor, and he said finance is at the heart of the UK's industries. Why so, and what kind of opportunities does it present to China-UK cooperation?
Well, the UK has a very long history of global finance, and we have our banks, HSBC, Standard Chartered, Barclays, who sort of sit at the heart of our financial services industry, alongside some of the world's great insurance firms, asset management firms. And I think the UK sits in quite a special place when it comes to the expertise and excellence that we have in our financial services industry, and also the unique connection that the UK has with China, given many of our financial institutions have a long history of working with China. HSBC has a huge presence in Hong Kong and is actually the largest foreign bank in China. So I think there's a very sort of unique relationship between the UK and China on the financial services side of things. But it's just one of our key industries, and you have the City of London that sits at the heart of that, and everything that the City of London does. They have a presence here in China as well. We work very closely with them. We've also got connections like the London-Shanghai Stock Connect, which
that's a big news. I read like 3 years ago in 2019.
That's right.
Has there been any other progress after that?
Yeah, well, since then, there's been a number of dual listings, so Chinese firms who have now listed in London as a result of the Stock Connect. I think we're up to double figures now, which is great, so steady progress. I think there's always more we can be doing to try and encourage more Chinese firms to be making use of that.
There's also progress on the RMB offshore trading, right?
Exactly.
London,
So London is now second only to Hong Kong as an offshore trading hub for international RMB.
Yeah, for RMB bonds. And let's talk about London's position as the international financial hub, because during the very long, prolonged Brexit process, there were talks saying like Frankfurt or Paris could take over the place of London as Europe's financial center, the world financial center. I mean, it seems that London has done quite well after Brexit. It is retaining its global financial center status.
Yeah, there's been a somewhat of a sort of repositioning that's had to take place because certain things that you could do whilst London was in the EU, you can no longer do. And so bits have maybe moved to Frankfurt and parts of mainland Europe, but still replicating London is impossible. You know, there's a lot of unique characteristics about London that will always remain those characteristics. And I think I've personally been pleasantly surprised at how the UK financial services industry has weathered that transition. And I think there's a lot of advantages that come from the UK being now sort of outside of the EU.
Okay, I need to talk a bit more about financial cooperation because tomorrow I'll be hosting part of the financial forum within CIFTIS where a lot of UK high-ranking officials and UK financial company executives will be present and giving speeches, also speak on the round tables. There are talks about China-UK financial cooperation. There are talks about China's financial industry high-quality growth, providing more services to offer common growth to achieve common prosperity, especially to low-income people. What kind of cooperation areas can you think of in such area? Yeah.
Well, I think you know, UK banks bring a lot of excellence in terms of personal finance and wealth management. And I think, and that's an area where if an individual is doing their financial planning in terms of their wealth management for their own personal finances and looking to the future, looking towards retirement, looking towards pensions, there's a lot of UK institutions that I think could bring a lot of value to that aspect here in China, where people obviously perhaps in the past would see sort of real estate as being the sort of pension pot that you'd invest into, and obviously real estate now is perhaps going through a new phase, and there's alternatives that people need to be looking at in terms of securing their financial future in terms of pensions and retirement. So there's areas that I think the UK can bring expertise which will add a lot of value to what China's now doing in terms of its entrance into its next phase of Chinese development.
Because China faces this very, easy problem. That's the scale of the market. Does it allow personalized services for each individuals, or should financial institutions pick their customer base? Like, oh, we should be targeting high or middle end customers instead of the broader base.
Right.
We cannot afford it, or we should adopt digital solutions to do personal financing or wealth management?
Yeah, it's a very good question, because I think there's different sort of banking products that suit different types of customers. And so you have the, say high net worth individuals who perhaps want more wealth management type products and investing in equities and different types of things. Whereas you have other customers who just want very simple personal finance accounts. So, I think for banks, and in some cases you have banks that are able to cater for all different groups in one go and sort of tailor their products accordingly, or you have some that specialize in one group and one in another. So, I think there's a lot that UK banks are doing that, Chinese banks can learn from, but actually a lot that's happening in China that UK banks can learn from too, especially in digital payments and all the fintech side of things. I mean, the UK is, when you look at the number of unicorns that exist in the UK has more unicorns, tech unicorns, than France and Germany combined. And of those tech unicorns, a very large number of them are in fintech. So actually, this sort of long history I talk about of UK financial services is now evolving into the sort of the digital age, and there's a lot of new players that are coming through in the fintech space that are doing a lot of quite exciting things, in particular in that sort of personal banking side of things.
If I could delve a little bit further, talking about the digital payment or fintech you mentioned, in China, you must be very customized, be very familiar with the digital payment, with a phone, scanning QR code, do payment on Alipay and WeChat Pay, or some shops, groceries even offer, face payment. You just scan your face and it's already paid. Don't need a phone, or people pay with their watches. I mean, you must be doing this in China, but it seems around the world, in some industrialized countries, people don't want that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look at it this way, right? My pockets are increasingly empty. All I really carry these days is just a phone.
So you've got used to it in China?
I'm very much used to it in China.
No problem in China?
I even don't have keys for my house. It's just a thumbprint or I scan a QR from my office, or whatever it might be.
Oh, yo, those smart locks sometimes even can scan your
Yeah,
face.
exactly,
It's all
exactly.
digital. Yeah.
If I go to the gym, it scans my face, you go in. So I think, that's the sort of environment that's been developed here, and people are very receptive of that and accepting of that, and it's proliferated at quite a fast speed. But I think that's also because the technology is very much available here, in terms of there's a lot of very affordable technology that people can implement, whether it's a gym, whether it's an office building, whether it's someone on their front door. I think perhaps in the UK, in the EU, there's a sort of, there isn't that availability of the technology at such affordable
Come on,
prices.
you just said that the UK is leading in Europe in fintech technologies. There are more unicorns than anywhere else.
Yeah, but it's more about sort of
Is it about the technology or
availability.
the mindsets? People.
It's a combination, I think, of both.
Okay, it's
I
mentality
think so
towards
people are a bit more
trading their private
their
information.
personal identity, exactly. Yeah, people are more careful about giving up that side of their personal
in
identity.
exchange for
Yeah.
convenience. So there's still such a worries in the public.
Yeah, but then I think the technology thing is also important because in China there's a bit more comfort with bringing technology into processes in terms of, for example, at a gym, bringing in a face scanner. The company will be more comfortable with the idea of investing into that and setting that up, and their customers will be more receptive of it. So it's kind of the two-sided thing, and it's a bit like with digital payments, where the speed with which China's gone from cash to QR code. It's a two-sided thing. The customer wants the convenience, but the business is also bringing the technology out at quite a rapid speed. So I think it's been incredibly successful in China. Can the UK and other countries replicate that sort of similar success? Maybe with time, but there will be things that people, there's hesitancy that I think will always be there with going as far perhaps as China has gone. And that's, in some ways, for good reason, because people want assurances that their personal data, their personal information is not ending up in the wrong hands or being abused in some way. Because if someone gets hold of your, retina scan and they're using that for nefarious purposes, that might be, as a concern. But I think that's also something that, technology providers can develop solutions for over time.
Okay, let's move on to another topic,
Okay.
which is also a global concern, climate change. In Beijing, we had some extreme weather conditions, flooding. And what about UK? Has UK undergone some extreme weather conditions in the past 1-2 years?
Yeah, I think the UK and Europe in general has been through some extreme weather conditions. There's been sort of fires in parts of Europe, as wildfires and so forth. And it's certainly something which people are more conscious of these days, is the sort of the change in temperatures and the effect that might be having on the climate. I mean, where I'm from in the UK, it's always quite cold and always quite windy and always quite rainy. So I think it's less obvious to someone from Scotland where the weather is changing. But if you're, I'm sure, from a place in Europe where...
Are you saying that Scotland's weather conditions are changing?
No, I'm saying that in Scotland the weather changes quite drastically throughout the year anyway.
Okay.
Because we have like 4 very distinct seasons where you can have snow in the winter, and then you can have, I suppose, a relatively cool sort of summer.
Okay.
But I think there are parts of the world and Europe and say, for example, in the US that are perhaps experiencing more drastic impact from changes in temperature than
because the
than
UK
the UK.
islands are surrounded by ocean. The ocean is mitigating some weather patterns.
Perhaps. I'm not sure exactly why. I'm not a sort of weather expert or anything like this, but I certainly hear less, talk of temperature changes, climate change necessarily in the UK than I do in other parts of the world where that are more directly impacted by sort of extreme heat or extreme, cold.
But does the British government pay attention to climate change and come out with any solutions?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, the UK has set 2050 as its goal for being carbon free.
Carbon neutrality. Yeah.
China is set its goal as 2060.
Yeah.
So both countries are working in the same sort of direction. And I think now, there's a role that business will play in sort of working towards achieving those goals. So I think, everyone's very much focused on how that can be how we can accomplish that sort of transition away from using fossil fuels and into renewables. Obviously, China has been at the forefront of developing new technologies that are being used all around the world, whether that's wind technology, whether that's solar. And actually, the UK on the wind side is one of the largest developers of wind farms in the world.
Oh.
So I think if you
on
look
land
at the
or in the ocean?
Offshore.
Offshore, okay.
Offshore. So if you look at the top 3 largest offshore wind farms in the world, they're all in the UK.
Which part?
So off the coast of the east coast of the UK. Yeah.
Like
so
Sussex.
yeah. So off the coast of like Humberside, off the coast of Scotland, the North Sea. So
all surrounding the England island.
Yeah, all up that sort of coast.
Oh, wow.
And the UK for many years has developed offshore capabilities for its oil and gas industry.
Yes.
That it's
Shell,
now able
yeah.
to.
British Oil, yeah.
Yeah, BP and Shell
British
and others.
Petroleum, yeah.
But they're now able to sort of transfer the knowledge they've acquired from the offshore oil and gas industry into offshore wind.
Yeah.
And that's helped to sort of accelerate the speed.
I do have a
with which
memory of the
things have
strong
grown.
wind. When I
exactly.
visited those coast areas.
Exactly.
There's a statue of Angel.
Yes.
The Angel statue. So windy. I mean,
Right.
it would not be right not to put those wind farms there.
That's the Angel of the North in Newcastle.
Newcastle, yes.
Yeah,
Perfect place to install wind farms.
Absolutely, and Scotland, the way it's positioned with the Atlantic Ocean is just sort of sucks in all the wind, which is why when you go to Scotland, it can always be very windy.
It's very natural to develop a wind energy industry there.
Yes.
And the final question would be about the Belt and Road Initiative. It's been 10 years, and China's been trying to promote this with developing countries, with industrialized countries too, such as the UK, which has a very good expertise in architecture, in engineering, in construction. So is the UK willing to participate, or has it already participated in this initiative and started construction projects in some third-party countries?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the UK service sector has been providing services to Chinese companies who've been investing in the BRI countries for many years. And so that could be, accounting services, project management services, construction consulting, engineering consulting, banking services even. So, I would say the participation rate of UK firms in what Chinese companies have been doing along the BRI is relatively high, and has been actually, the case even prior to the existence of the BRI. It's just that the UK professional services industry is a global industry, and is really, one of the strong points of the UK economy. So. Yeah, I think there's examples in legal services, for example, where, if a Chinese business is looking to invest into, say, the Middle East, and they're looking for lawyers who are experienced in providing, the types of legal services that they require, then, UK services are well positioned to support that type of activity.
Excellent to know that. If I could add one more question, it would be about the upcoming G20 summit in New Delhi, India, where the group leaders will get together to talk about issues that concerns everyone. UK is part of the G20 and also part of the G7. G20 is previously G7, expanding to G20. So at this particular point, I mean, the world economy is at such an intricate crossroads. This talks about singularity, this talk about cooperation. In what areas do you think these world leaders should talk about, and what very urgent issues should they come up with tangible solutions?
It's a very good question. I mean, I think, very high on the list certainly will be areas like sustainability, and I'm sure that will be featuring quite prominently on the G20 list of discussion points. But I think also ensuring a stable global economy. So obviously, over the last 30 years, the world has become more interconnected than ever before. And I think what's happened in recent years with COVID and with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, there are, that sort of globalized economy has come under some, question. And so I think what we need to do is make sure that we keep the structure that we put in place stable and steady, which is obviously what business needs to be able to sort of plan long term into the future, to be able to have steady, reliable supply chains and these sorts of things that allow a business to operate in an efficient manner and avoid the increase of costs and inflation, which as we all know has impacted quite heavily on the UK, the US, less so here in China, but it's I mean that's certainly something that government should take very seriously and make sure that we are working together to do all we can to keep keep markets stable and keep the global economy as stable as we can.
When you say less so much in here, but I'm sure that the Chinese decision makers have made a lot of efforts in thinking about all the ways, all the tools in their boxes to deal with these unstable factors, like
absolutely.
The fluctuating energy prices, fluctuating global food supply, and also supply chain, shipping problems, all these interruptions and ban on technology shipments to China. So China, as just like the UK, would love to have a peaceful global environment and very stable economic policies throughout the key policymaker throughout the world, a coordination, a communication system throughout the world, so that in the currency market, we do not want to see big fluctuation of money printing, quantitative easing or tightening. All these creates problems on food prices, on commodity prices, on the affecting everyone's dinner tables. So very nice talking with you.
Likewise.
Thank you so
A real
much,
pleasure.
Mr. Simpson. We look forward to more events so we can brainstorm on different issues and have more conversation, in-depth conversations with business people from the UK and international organizations like your organization. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.